What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name is Kyle. In this video, we're doing the wide receiver rankings. I've already covered the quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends. You guys can check out those videos. I'm probably going to post them in the comments below or in the description. But we're going to hop into a screen share here, and I'm just going to go over all of my wide receiver rankings up on the fantasyfellowship.com. You guys can go check it out. It's all in the playbook, or you can hover over the content tab and click on rankings. It should get you where you need to go. And I just want to point out that these are kind of universal rankings for me. So independent of PPR, half PPR standard, it's just kind of how I feel about these guys. And we're going to start with the tier one. We're going to do these by tiers. And I'm just going to kind of keep showing you guys as we go down the list. I have two receivers in the tier one here, Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase. I do believe Justin Jefferson should be the number one player taken in almost any format. You can maybe argue in a standard league, you can look at some of the running backs, but I have no problems with Justin Jefferson. He's the best receiver in the league. It wouldn't surprise me if he finishes as wide receiver one, he's going to flirt with 2,000 yards. He could just have one of those crazy touchdown seasons. I think if you have the first overall pick, you're taking Justin Jefferson. And in a full PPR league, I think number two should be Ja'Marr Chase. You could argue some of the running backs there, CMC or Eckler, but I feel really strongly about Ja'Marr Chase. I know a lot of people are nervous about Joe Burrow and his calf strain. Even if Joe Burrow, if he's out there week one, which I expect him to be, he's just not going to be as mobile. He's going to have to, stay in the pocket a little bit more, which I'm fine with. And keep in mind, like, the dude's had over a month to heal from this injury when it comes time to play week one. So I think the Joe Burrow concerns are not a concern for me. I'm taking Ja'Marr Chase second every time in my best ball drafts right now. I love JJ. I love Ja'Marr Chase. Keep it simple. You want one of these stud receivers. And guess what? Last year, Ja'Marr Chase actually, when he played, he led the league in targets per game. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ja'Marr Chase ended up having one of those crazy, insane efficiency years where he just catches a ton of passes, he catches a ton of touchdowns, and he could be the wide receiver one. So I like JJ. I love Ja'Marr Chase, both guys in my top two here. Let's move on to tier number two. And tier number two gets a little bit more fun. We have some old reliables here. Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. We know what we're getting with these guys. Tyreek Hill, of course, he put up a massive season with the Dolphins in his first season with them last year. I expect him to pick up where he left off. And the camp news coming out on Tyreek Hill was that he looks even more comfortable in this offense. So he could even have more on his plate than we did see last year. So I love Tyreek Hill. You also have Jalen Waddle with a rib thing right now. I'm not going to be too concerned about that, but Tyreek Hill is healthy. Tyreek Hill's in the offense, and he's having a good summer training camp. Cooper Kupp, he did hurt his, I think it was the ankle or the knee. I can't remember what it was, but he had some kind of lower body injury a couple weeks ago. He's back to practicing. He seems fine, so I wouldn't worry about that. Cooper Kupp, before his injury last year, he was the number one fantasy player. He was leading the league in fantasy points per game. He was just by far and away the number one receiver, running back, or tight end for that matter. So Cooper Kupp, we love him. I think he's gonna have a nice season as long as he stays healthy. You also are attaching yourself to Matthew Stafford. We need him to stay healthy as well. But either way, I like Cooper Kupp. He's considered a top 5 pick, I think, in full PPR leagues. And then Stephon Diggs, we know what we're getting with Stephon Diggs. He's going to be up there in the league with targets and receptions and touchdowns as well. Buffalo, their offensive line struggled mightily in the preseason game, so I do want to note that they do have more targets to throw the ball around this year. So I like Stephon Diggs. I don't know if I love him as I like him in the back end of the first round. So to me, Hill and Kupp are both fringe top 5 picks. I think I might even separate these and put Stephon Diggs in my tier 3. So I like Diggs, but I don't want to reach on him in the top 5 or 6 picks or so. But let's move on to tier number 3. And tier number 3 is probably one of my favorite tiers to pull from. And that goes from Amon-Ra, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Davante Adams, and Garrett Wilson. At the top of tier 3, yes, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think is probably going over 100 receptions this year. Amon-Ra did have an ankle thing last week, but he's going to be fine again. We got 2 more full weeks of time before week 1 starts for that Thursday night game. So Amon-Ra is going to be fine. He's just going to get pummeled with targets, guys. I see him hitting probably 150 targets, over 100 receptions. And last year, the dude got tackled a lot, at the 1 or 2 yard line. He could have had a lot more touchdowns. So I'm expecting a touchdown spike this year, and you got the safety of his high floor in a full PPR league with receptions and targets. So I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I like A.J. Brown there too at number 7. My thing with A.J. Brown was last year he played his first full season healthy. I don't expect him to play a full 17 games this year. I like A.J. Brown, but he's got more of that boom bust to him. And I think comparing Amon-Ra to A.J. Brown, I'm going to go with the guy that's going to get more targets and more receptions, and I think that's Amon-Ra. Now, I still love A.J. Brown. I think he's more of a late first, early second round pick. Again, I want a piece of that Philadelphia offense, so I still love A.J. Brown. CeeDee Lamb coming out at number 8. He's one of the safest receivers I think you can take. We know he's been pretty healthy throughout his career. He's Dak's number 1 target. He's going to get fed a lot of targets again. And he's basically just he's entering that age where he's just super reliable. He's young enough still. He's in his prime. I want a piece of that Dallas Cowboys passing offense. I go with CeeDee Lamb. Number 9 is Davante Adams. Slightly nervous about the Raiders, but I still think Davante Adams is probably a pretty good pick at his ADP right now. You can get him in the beginning parts of the second round, which feel really good. The thing that looks really good when I take Davante is when I get him as my wide receiver 2. If you wanted to start your draft A.J. Brown and Davante Adams, CeeDee Lamb and Davante Adams, something like that, it feels like a cheat code being able to put Davante at your wide receiver 2 spot. I am slightly concerned about him in my number 1 spot, again, just because of the Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo is probably not going to play the full season. The Raiders just also have some bad vibes, going around all off season. So I'm slightly concerned about that. I do like Garrett Wilson a lot too. He did have an ankle injury not too long ago, but he's back in practice and he's sounding fine. I do think Garrett Wilson is probably going to be one of those second-year receivers that takes a huge leap with Aaron Rodgers as his QB, and he's probably going to shatter a lot of Jets wide receiver numbers. So I like Garrett Wilson. I think all these top 10 guys can all be your wide receiver 1, but it's really fun. Like when you can get Davante or Wilson or even CeeDee Lamb as your wide receiver 2, even Amon-Ra St. Brown as your wide receiver 2, that's where it starts to look really, really fun. But let's move on to tier number 4. In tier number 4, I view these guys all as solid wide receiver 2s. They're like the best options at wide receiver 2. Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, and T. Higgins. Waddle's the number 2 on his own team behind Tyreek Hill. I think he's going to close the gap a little bit, from last year's gap to Tyreek Hill. Olave is the clear number 1 target on the Saints, and I think Metcalf's still going to be the lead target guy on Seattle, whereas Devonta Smith and T. Higgins are both the number 2 technically on their team. But I don't think the gap between A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith is that great. A.J. Brown is going to lead the team in yards. I think Devonta still could lead the team in receptions. And then T. Higgins there, he's just a really solid wide receiver 2. He's going to need Jamar Chase to finish as a wide receiver 1. But either way, like I said at the beginning here, Waddle, Olave, Metcalf, Smith, T. Higgins, these guys are super sweet to get as your wide receiver 2. You can get them at the end of the second round, sometimes into the third round with some of these guys. Absolutely love this tier. Usually when I'm drafting, I try to get one of the top guys, but otherwise, if I can just get 2 of those guys, I feel pretty good about it. Sometimes I like to start my draft with a running back. I get Amon-Ra in the second, and I get like Olave or Metcalf in the third, locking one of these guys in. And guess what? Like all these guys, Waddle, Olave, Metcalf, Smith, Higgins, they could all finish as top 10, top 12 wide receivers. And the fact that you can pencil them in at your wide receiver 2 spot feels pretty good. So I love this tier 4. You should try and get one of these guys on your team this year as your wide receiver 2. Let's move on to tier 5. Tier number 5 for me consists of Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, and Amari Cooper. I think these guys are all pretty solid wide receiver 2s. I don't know if they have the upside to finish as a top 10 wide receiver. So I think their ceiling is kind of in between wide receiver 10 and 15 in that range there, but they just feel super safe. Like Keenan Allen, we know he's a really good receiver. He's going to rack up catches from Keenan Allen or from Justin Herbert. Calvin Ridley, it seems like he has stepped up and he's going to be the number 1 read for Trevor Lawrence this season. I know there's some uncertainty with that, but I'm beginning to feel pretty good about it. He looks great as a wide receiver 2. And guess what? You can sometimes get him as your number 3 receiver in a redraft league. And then Amari Cooper is just super safe, reliable. I expect him to play and click well with Deshaun Watson. I have no issues with any of these guys as my wide receiver 2. But hey, when you can get him as your wide receiver 3, that's where it feels really good. Moving on to tier 6, and that's where this tier is going to get a little bit bigger. We'll start with starting with Debo, Judy, Mike Williams, DJ Moore, Watson, Deontay, DeAndre Hopkins. Now, this tier, to me, I feel best about these guys being my wide receiver 3 on my lineup or in your flex. If you start 2 wide receivers and you want to put these guys in your flex, that's where they start to look really good. Now, keep in mind, I do think all of these guys, I have them all in my top 25, so I think they can be wide receiver 2s, but I really like to draft, on my roster, I love penciling in these guys as wide receiver threes because I think they're going to outperform that and give me a value there. So Debo looked good last night in this preseason game. Jerry Jeudy's been Russell Wilson's #1 target. Mike Williams is going to be in the slot more this season, which I think his floor is going to boost a little bit. You know, he has those bad games of 3 to 5 points. I think his bad games are going to be more like 7 to 8 points this season. So I love Mike Williams. He's got tremendous ceiling week to week, you know, if he goes off for 100 yards and a touchdown or two. DJ Moore, dude took that one screen to the house in the first preseason game. I don't think you can expect that all the time, but we know he's a really damn good receiver. He's a yard after catch guy, and he's the clear #1 target for Justin Fields. He feels really good in a full PPR league. Christian Watson, again, he's more of a boom bust play, but I expect him to grow in year 2. Jordan Love seems to have a pretty good connection with him. And then Deontay Johnson, man, he's one of the biggest sleepers in a full PPR league. If you can get him as your #3 receiver, he's going to finish as a top 24, you know, just based on volume alone in a full PPR league. He's going to score more than 0 touchdowns this year, so we'll be fine with that. And then DeAndre Hopkins, man, with the Treylon Burks injury right now, that's going to open up Hopkins. I do have him ranked 25th. He does look best as a wide receiver 3, but I think you're going to get wide receiver 2 returns from DeAndre Hopkins as long as he's healthy. Moving on to tier number 7, a little bit smaller tier, and this is a fun tier for me too. McLaurin, Ayuk, Kirk, London. I find these guys falling a lot in drafts. They all feel like really safe wide receiver 3s to me that, who knows, like if things break right for them and they just have a boss season, they're going to finish as top 24 wide receivers. So these guys, McLaurin, Ayuk, Kirk, and London, I want these guys on my team. And what's crazy is sometimes you can get them as your #3, #4 receiver, which just feels way too good of a value. So McLaurin, expect him to be the lead target man for Sam Howell, Brandon Ayuk. I actually think Brandon Ayuk's a better receiver than Deebo Samuel. If Deebo Samuel gets hurt, Brandon Ayuk's going to finish as a top 15 receiver again. So I love Brandon Ayuk. Christian Kirk, I think, is just going to be super steady, reliable. Probably doesn't have that top 12 ceiling that he had last year, but he's still going to be a really useful piece for fantasy. And then Drake London, man, I think he's really going to click with Desmond Ridder. I'd rather have Drake London than Kyle Pitts if I'm drafting a Falcon. So I like Drake London a lot. Another year 2 player that could take a huge step forward. He looked good in the preseason game the other night too. Moving on to tier number 8. Tier 8 gets a little bit bigger here. And what I like about tier 8 is this is kind of the tier that everyone just keeps passing. We got Godwin, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, George Pickens, Jahan Dotson, Brandon Cooks, and Marquise Brown. So it's a mix of young guys and veterans. I think Godwin and Lockett are both really nice pieces as a wide receiver 3. We trust them. We know they're good players. We just need them to stay healthy. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the first rookie receiver off the board. He's a guy that I like putting him right next to Lockett in my rankings because, like, if I can't get Lockett, I'm getting Smith-Njigba. I think for me personally, I'm taking JSN over Tyler Lockett because I think when it comes to late November, December towards the fantasy playoffs, I want JSN on my team. I just think that we're going to see those momentum curves shift towards JSN as he, just gets more and more comfortable in the NFL. Take one of George Pickens, Jahan Dotson, guys. You need one of these these are second-year receivers that are both going to play much better than they did as rookies. So the fact that you can get them as your wide receiver 4 or 5, probably your first wide receiver off the bench, please do so. I think Pickens and Dotson are both elite wide receiver 2s on their team, and they're going to make a lot of plays all season long. Please try and get Pickens or Dotson, one of them on your bench. And then Brandon Cooks and Marquise Brown. These guys are just old, reliable. You can get them as your #4, #5 receiver on your bench. Brandon Cook's going to be heavily involved in the Cowboys offense, and Marquise Brown is technically the #1 read in Arizona. Hopefully we can get Kyler Murray back sooner than later. Moving on to tier number 9. Tier number 9 is an interesting tier. I have Gabe Davis, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison. So 2 rookies and some veteran receivers here. I think the veterans, Gabe, Evans, Pittman, these guys are all guys that I'm probably not going to feel comfortable starting every week. But, hey, they do have value. They can be on my bench. If there's an injury to a receiver on their team or they're going to get more targets that week, or say they have a really soft matchup, I'm going to feel good about starting them. So Davis, Evans, and Pittman, I like these guys. They're still going to get volume. They're probably all going over 100 targets this year, especially Pittman and Mike Evans. But take them, put them on your bench. I don't know if I feel comfortable with them as my wide receiver 3 flex in my lineup, but I do think they have value and they should be, part of your bench at least. And then the 2 rookies here, Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, these guys might struggle to start the year, but sure enough, as the season goes on, October into November, you're going to see these guys really start to play some good ball. Zay Flowers could be the #1 receiver read for Lamar Jackson. And then Jordan Addison, he's got some work to do because I think he's behind Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson in terms of targets. He's got to compete with KJ Osborne to be the #2 receiver in 2 wide receiver sets. So I think planning to take these guys, put them on your bench and see what happens. That's probably the plan. I wouldn't feel comfortable with them in my starting lineup week 1, though. Moving on to tier number 10. And tier 10 is a fun tier to grab one. You should grab one tier 10 receiver. Sutton, Elijah Moore, Sky Moore, Michael Thomas, and Treylon Burks. These guys all have, some question marks, but man, if their season hits, like they could be really, really valuable. Sutton, it sounds like he's making a nice year 2 summer with Russell Wilson. He's lost some weight. He's trimmed up and he's a little bit quicker. It sounds like he's going to be involved in the offense as the #2 receiver. Elijah Moore, the #2 receiver for Deshaun Watson. He's going to be lined up all over the place in the slot. I actually really like Elijah Moore. I've been drafting him a lot, and he can be on your bench, man. He could be a guy that we're starting, after week 1. If he goes out and gets 8 targets and 6 catches for 82 yards or something, we could be starting Elijah Moore really quickly. Same thing with Sky Moore, man. I think he's stepping into the slot role for the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to freaking rotate their receivers hardcore all year, but I do think Sky Moore is the preferred slot receiver for Pat Mahomes. Michael Thomas, if he stays healthy, man, he's going to be a nice wide receiver 3 flex play. Don't know if I want to start him week 1. We want to see how it looks. And then Treylon Burks, you can get him at a discount right now because of that injury. I think he's questionable to play week 1, and even if he doesn't, he's a guy that I think will be fine once he gets back on the field. He reportedly was having an amazing camp, and I think I was taking him a lot before that injury. We have to cool off now, but put him on your bench. He's a fantastic year 2 talent that could be a big player towards the fantasy playoffs. Moving on to tier number 11. Tier 11 consists of Nico Collins, Romeo Doubs, Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham, and Jakobi Meyers. These guys are all really nice bench pieces. I don't think you want to start Nico Collins week 1, but he could be the lead target for CJ Stroud. Romeo Doubs made a really nice catch last night with with Jordan Love on a deep shot. Romeo Doubs is going to be on the field as the #2 receiver for the Packers, and he's going to get targets, whether it's 5, 6 per game. He's a guy that could just, especially if Christian Watson gets injured or a hamstring or something comes up, Doubs would be the #1 target for Jordan Love. I'm not sure what to do with Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham. If I'm taking one, give me Bateman. He's coming back from a Liz Frank, but I think there's going to be value in that Ravens passing game. I'm not opposed to just collecting one of these guys and saying, hey, I'll see what happens, on my bench. And then don't sleep on Jakobi Meyers. I think he is a really nice player. He's back in the Josh McDaniels system. He's going to be on the field a lot as a #2 receiver. And it seems like he's really clicking with Jimmy Garoppolo right now. So I love these guys it's my wide receiver 5 or 6 on my bench, basically from Elijah Moore to Jakobi Meyers. Like, these could be your last receivers on your bench. And then as we get into tier 12, these are all guys that, maybe they don't need to be drafted in a redraft league. Like Quentin Johnston probably should because he's a rookie Charger, 1st-round pick. Juju, Zay Jones, Lazard, Gallup, MVS, Osborne, Hodgins, DJ Chark, Tyler Boyd. Hopefully you guys are done drafting receivers by this. You want at least 5 of the top 50 or so on my list here. These guys are all probably the last receiver that I would take on my bench. Usually they're the third or 4th target on their team. I know Juju's listed as the #1, but I don't really trust Juju. I don't really trust the Patriots passing offense either. I don't mind Zay Jones. He's kind of like in that Michael Gallup, KJ Osborne, Alan Lazard. Like he's going to be the 3rd read a lot, and he's going to be the #3 receiver a lot. MVS is just a deep ball kind of guy. Hodgins will be on the field a lot as a wide receiver for Daniel Jones, and DJ Chark could be the #1 receiver for Bryce Young. I'm not sure. Tier 12 kind of just keeps bleeding into tier 13 for me. And again, hopefully you guys are done drafting redraft receivers at this point, but Tyler Boyd, Rashee Rice could be a nice stash. I like Alec Pierce as a late stash here. He's going to probably jive well with Anthony Richardson's deep ball. Rondale Moore in a PPR league. I'm not drafting Mooney. Marvin Mims is probably a guy that I'm comfortable putting as one of the last picks for my receiver room. I don't think Adam Thielen's going to last long. He might be a guy that has a good September, but I don't see him being on my fantasy roster in December. Mingo, actually, I prefer Mingo because he's a long-term investment. He might be a guy worth putting on your bench. Jaden Reed looks really good too. I think, grabbing Mims, Mingo, or Reed as one of your last receivers makes a lot of sense. And then you get, we keep getting farther into the tiers here. DPJ, Paris Campbell, Slayton, Samuel, Richie James. These guys are nice receivers, like wide receiver 6s. If you need to just keep chunking away at the position, I think they can be of use. But let's be real. A lot of these guys are probably going to be undrafted in your redraft league. I'm just not in on Kadarius Toney. I don't trust him. I don't want to babysit him on my roster. I'd rather have Richie James, rather have Sky Moore, rather have Rashee Rice, someone that I at least can stay on the field. And then I'm not drafting Jameson Williams this year. I need to see it before I buy it. I don't want to burn a roster spot all year. So that's why I have these guys ranked pretty low. But hopefully, again, you need at least 5 receivers in the top 50 or so. So kind of navigate your drafts that way. Make sure you have at least 5 good ones. You could grab a 6th one, whether it's one of those rookies I mentioned at the end. But there you have it, guys. That is my wide receiver rankings. I'm done making videos on the rankings, but I will be doing website updates. What we just looked at, you'll see an update on that next weekend. I'm going to probably do that next Thursday or Friday before the weekend drafts, and then we'll have one more website update before Labor Day. So 2 more weekends left to draft your redraft teams. Check out thefantasyfellowship.com. I have cheat sheets for download. I have rankings, projections for you guys to look at. Everything's on there for you guys. So take a look at that. Enjoy. Check out the quarterback, running back, tight end ranking videos. And then just a teaser, on Tuesday night, I will be uploading probably the best video that I have this summer. I'm going to be going over all 32 teams, talking about their fantasy football depth charts, and just letting you guys know what I think about each team, who I'm drafting on that team. And yeah, it's basically just going to be a jam-packed, probably about 1 hour and 10 minutes, something like that. But stay tuned for that. Tuesday, it's coming out. We'll see you guys in a future video. Have a good afternoon. Peace.